the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
However, Mississippi State, if there was going to be one, and the big caveat here is there is not nearly as much talent at Mississippi State in year 2 under Levy as there was under Sam Pittman in year 4 at that point. With the Hogs, a little bit different. That being said, Blake Shapen is a good college football quarterback. I think they have a two-headed monster at tailback that I think is going to be one of the better running back rooms in the SEC next year. I think the defense is going to stink again, and I'm not optimistic about what the Hogs or what the Dogs have cooking on that side of the ball. But I do think Blake Shapen, who had 8 TDs, 1 pick, he was a Big 12 champion quarterback and kept Oklahoma State out of the CFP 3 years ago in a game. I don't know if you remember, where the goal line, like Baylor stopped Oklahoma State at the 1 to keep him out of the CFP, and Cincinnati gets that spot. Big what if there. That being said, Blake Shapen has proven to be a good above average quarterback. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy the last couple of years. The thing is, he got knocked out after the 4th game of the year last year. They're playing Mississippi State early. Like, this is not a late in the calendar type deal. So if they get Mississippi State early, there's a strong chance that Blake Shapen will still be on the field at that point. And I think they're going to have the quarterback advantage depending on who's QB1 for Tennessee in that game. And you know how I feel about Jake Merklinger and company. Big Merklinger. I just don't think we're going to get Merklinger at that point. My prediction is still the bye week after Mississippi State going into Arkansas is when we get Merk's first start.
Okay.
That being said, I think it's going to be Aguilar, and I think it's going to be a cowbell situation where it's going to be loud. It's going to be a big time deal, like a lot of history with Levy and Heupel, obviously. That's the one I've now circled of, like, fans, I know you're going to want that to be a nice, easy game where you don't have to take the antacids. I don't know if that's going to be the case here. Am I crazy, Sam Beard?
I don't think you're crazy, but I will give you something to kind of talk you off the ledge a little bit. And I think this goes not only for the Mississippi State game, I think it can carry you throughout the entire season. Something about Tennessee's schedule that I think is getting swept under the rug a little bit is the fact that we talked about last year, there was kind of that 3 to 4 game gap where it felt like a lot of them were kind of those trap scenarios, and you had that kind of month of hell a little bit. I feel like this schedule is spaced out pretty well between your quote unquote trap games and then your rivalry games. And so I think for Mississippi State, you know, you get Georgia in week 3, but then you get UAB the week before Mississippi State. I got to imagine that that's kind of, you know, you're not just glossing over UAB, but I would imagine there's guys on that staff that are saying, hey, we don't have to prepare for UAB this week. Let's make sure that we go into Mississippi State on the road at night, to your point, where it can get a little bit of a ruckus environment. You can get the weird night SEC magic. I feel like you're going to come in there with a really strong game plan. And then I think you can kind of take that to some other games too. You've got Arkansas at home as a revenge game before your Alabama game. That feels like a little bit of an easier road home there. Oklahoma, we've talked about how that's kind of a swing game in the schedule. You get Kentucky and Lexington, and we all know that Kentucky's not going to be a great football team this year. Florida down in Gainesville, that's a tough game, obviously, every single time we play Florida. Well, you get New Mexico State before then. So to me, I just look at kind of the weeks before, and I know Mississippi State is going to be coming off of Northern Illinois the week before Tennessee. So they should be able to have a pretty nice game plan in terms of preparation in that sense. But I kind of look at it more as I think Tennessee is going to be able to have kind of ultimate preparation coming into these. And I don't necessarily think your opponents are going to be in too much more of an advantageous spot than you are. I agree with you on the Blake Shapen aspect of things. I do think he was an underrated quarterback before he got hurt. And they did have, you know, they really have a strong rushing attack this year. I think you put it nicely saying that Mississippi State defense stinks, though. And I think this is a game where you can potentially just go in there and hope that you can execute your game plan enough, run the football enough, not have to put too much pressure on your new quarterback to go make game-winning plays. I think you can go out there and win that game. I absolutely do think it is. It has the potential to be kind of that one slip up. Hey, what the hell did you do in this game, Josh Heupel?
Yeah, I remember talking to a Mississippi sports radio host at the time, and he was like, yeah, I don't like, because Coleman Hutzler is their DC, and he was like an outside linebackers coach at Alabama the year prior, never called any defense, I don't believe, but it was like one of those that raised eyebrows, like, I don't know about this one. And that defense was horrific last year, and he's back for another year. I don't know. It's just those offensive coaches. Like, this is one of the things I tell Tennessee fans. Like, one of the most underrated aspects of the Heupel era thus far is Heupel did not make the mistake that a lot of offensive-minded guys make, which is they hire DC wrong, but they also stay out of the way and they don't want to deal with the defensive side of the ball. So they stick with those guys for too long, and it ends up costing them their job because they just did not hire Lincoln Riley, bringing Alex Grinch with him to USC for a couple of years. That set that program back. Like, everyone knew at the end of Oklahoma, it's like, Grinch is not a good DC. Like, those Oklahoma defenses were holding Oklahoma back from those legendary years with Kyler Murray and company. Early on with USC, like, they couldn't take full advantage of Caleb Williams because you had Alex Grinch calling. Now you go and hire D'Anton Lynn, the DC who was really good for UCLA, your crosstown rival. Things are starting to trend in a positive direction. The defense is making strides. Heupel, like, he brought in Rodney Garner from the beginning. He was like, you're coaching defensive line. Tim Banks, like, defense guy from Penn State. Penn State has always gotten one of the top 10, 15 defenses. William Inge, co-DC of a national champion runner-up. Like, there's William Martinez, all kinds of experience all across the SEC and everywhere else. It's a loaded defensive side of the ball, but he hired well on that side and has stuck with them. And they have one of the best defensive staffs in the SEC. That being said, Mississippi State, Jeff Lebby, I just don't think it's one of those where you're looking at it, you're like, oh no. Like, remember Todd Grantham? Like, Dan Mullen was really loyal to Todd Grantham, and you're like, man, you're the best play caller maybe in the country. Like, Todd Grantham is just not a good defensive coordinator. You got to move on, man. Like, you're really good. Just hire you don't even have to hire an elite defensive coordinator. Just get someone in the top 20s, man, 30s. But like, you can't do this every year. You're sabotaging yourself. Miami just did this last year. Shannon Dawson, one of the best offensive coordinators in the sport. Miami #1 in scoring. Defense, terrible defensive coordinator hire from Mario Cristobal. And now he goes out, gets Minnesota's DC. Minnesota, they know defense. Offense, not so much. Defense, hey, smart hire. But it's just some offensive geniuses just don't hire DC right. And then they stay hands off or they're loyal to a fault. And you're like, man, that whole thing could have gone differently. And Heupel, to his credit, did not go the Jeff Lebby route where he hired well from the beginning and has just jam-packed that staff.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. And I think it's one that maybe for certain Tennessee fans gets them potentially frustrated with some of the decisions that Josh Heupel's made with maybe some coaches offensively where they've wanted kind of some new faces in there. And you've gotten a lot of guys with NFL experience, or to your point, just experience all around the country, all around that defensive side of the ball. And it's clearly worked out for you. And then, it feels like maybe at times where you could have cut bait with somebody on the offensive staff, and Heupel keeps him around because he's been with him since UCF, or he's a friend of his or something like that. I do think it's been interesting that it's kind of been one-sided on that side of the ball, but I think it's a good point that it's an underrated aspect of kind of the Heupel tenure is that he knows he's an offensive guy. He knows his strengths, and he's going to say, hey, I'm going to go out there and field the best possible staff defensively to where these guys can recruit on their own, they can coach on their own, they can develop on their own, and I can really just kind of go out there and not really have to worry about what's getting done on the defensive side of the ball because I have just ultimate trust in all of these guys that we've put in there. I think there's a reason why Tennessee is really kind of taken that next step in terms of consistency over the last few years with him. And I think a lot of that is due in part to just that defense really being able to find themselves and find their identity kind of within the Tennessee offense and how they like to run things.
I love it. Speaking of Tennessee football here, Sam, your favorite of the 9 in the boat right now, 2026 recruits. Who's your favorite? Who are you?
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.